David and Louise Turpin's 13 children grew up in an environment so tightly controlled and abusive that when the media discovered what these kids had to endure to survive, they dubbed the home a house of horrors. Their children were isolated from the world and locked inside their home for years. For a few of the children, this lasted decades. Some of the children were so removed from the world that they didn't know what police or medicine was, but then they were finally released from their confinement. When police officers entered the home, they found the children so malnourished that they couldn't even tell that one of the victims was actually a 29-year-old woman when they saved her. She was the eldest of the family, but was so underfed and unwell that her muscle growth had stagnated and she was only 82 pounds. Feces adorned the carpets as the parents didn't always allow them to go to the bathroom. The children had even been chained or tied to their beds rather frequently. Between only being fed once a day and being granted one shower per year, it seemed inevitable that one of the children would try to escape. In January 2018, David and Louise's 17-year-old daughter finally did. It will be a long road to mental and physical recovery for all the children as their parents spend the rest of their lives in prison. But let's take a deep dive into Louise's background. The Turpin parents were charged with multiple counts of torture, false imprisonment, child abuse, and cruelty to a dependent adult. David and Louise pleaded guilty to 14 related criminal charges. Louise's sister, Teresa Robinette, said that their mother, Phyllis, regularly sold the two girls to a wealthy paedophile who would routinely abuse them. She recalled, "He would slip money into my hand as he molested me. I can still feel his breath on my neck as he whispered to be quiet. We begged her not to take us to him, but she would simply say, 'I have to clothe and feed you.' Louise was abused the worst. He destroyed my self-worth as a child, and I know he destroyed hers too." But what Louise did to her family was a shock to her sister. She always thought that she was a good girl who never drank, smoked, or did any drugs. Teresa's relationship with her nieces and nephews was virtually non-existent, as she only met the four eldest in person once and spoke to the rest over video chat, what ended up becoming less and less over time. She said, "I don't even know if you can say any of us had a relationship with the children. Never in a million years had we thought she was abusing the kids." She would just start making excuses of why she couldn't video chat. Teresa's shock at how her sister turned out is understandable, but their other sister, Elizabeth Flores, was less surprised, and her explanation of Louise makes more of a complete picture of the Turpin family. Elizabeth's book, Sisters of Secrets, contains troubling allegations against Louise. She not only confirms Teresa's claims about the siblings being repeatedly sexually abused, but that Louise began to practice witchcraft as an adult, was consumed by gambling, obsessed with snakes, and suffered from severe alcoholism. The book describes an unhappy home where Louise and Elizabeth covered their ears when their parents fought, and a rough time at school where she was bullied. It was years later, when she was in her 40s, that things really got bad. Elizabeth said she was drinking, smoking, partying, going to bars, practicing witchcraft, gambling, handling and eating rattlesnakes, dressing and acting vulgar on MySpace, sex practices, and it goes on and on. I was really concerned for her. Despite all of this, she explained Louise was never even on her radar for child endangerment issues. On the other hand, David Turpin had a promising childhood and career. He studied computer engineering at the Virginia Tech University. He worked for both Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics before he retired in 2012. 40 miles outside of Blacksburg in Mercer County, he landed two high-level jobs with two of the biggest defense companies in the world. He attended the same high school as his future wife, even though he was 8 years older. His parents, James and Betty Turpin, told ABS News that their son had become a computer engineer once he graduated from university. The 1984 yearbook lists him as a senior electrical engineering major and as a member of the Electrical and Computer Engineering Honor Society. David and Louise eloped when he was about 24 years old and she was 16. He had convinced her high school, Princeton, West Virginia, to let him sign her out, and then the two made their way all the way to Texas before Phyllis Robinette and her husband, Wayne, phoned the police and made complaints, forcing them to come back home. Louisa's father was a preacher, and his motivation to bring her back stemmed entirely from the urge to have a proper ceremony. The 1,000-mile cross-country trip came to a close with them getting married in Princeton in 1984. Teresa said, "My mum allowed Louise to date David secretly because she loved him and he was from a Christian family and she trusted Louise, but she was doing it behind my dad's back and he didn't know they were dating. And then one day, David went into the high school and they let him sign her out of school and they ran away. He had his car and they drove away." Teresa recalled that this was the first time she ever noted her parents switching sides. Her father wasn't outraged, rather he told his wife that they should let their 16-year-old daughter live the life she wanted. He was, however, angry with his wife. So they got married, came back to Princeton, had a small church wedding just with the two families. Then they went back to Texas to start their lives together, Teresa says. When Louisa's father retired in 2012, he wanted to come to visit her, but she told him not to. There was clearly a lasting rift between her and her parents, possibly from the trust being broken early on in her life. David and Louise Turpin had already been living in Paris, California, for decades when her mother died in February 2016. Her father died 3 months after that. Teresa said, on their deathbeds, both of them asked her to come see them. She wouldn't. She didn't even show up to their funerals. However, David Turpin did come for both of their funerals. Though he was quite successful both academically and professionally, things began to sour for him as a husband. A 2011 bankruptcy filing for $240,000 in credit card debt reflected either bad accounting, a lack of professional opportunities, or increased detachment from the world. The bankruptcy documents listed his income as an engineer at Northrop Grumman, another upper league defense corporation, at $140,000 per year. He was also listed as the principal of Sandcastle Day School, which he operated out of his home. His wife, meanwhile, was listed as a homemaker with the Paris residence and its function as a school serving as the hub of her educational role to the 13 students. They had 10 daughters and 3 sons between 1988 and 2015. They then left the church and experimented in other lifestyles such as swinging. However, in 2007 they moved 10 of their children into an isolated trailer on their property. They then took the 2 youngest and left the rest of the children to fend for themselves, bringing them groceries each week, but there was never enough for all of them. Jordan, who was 6 around the time, said there was a lot of starving and she had resorted to eating ketchup or mustard or ice. Eventually they would leave the Rio Vista property in 2010, and the neighbours found feces and beds with ropes tied to them, along with dead cats and piles of garbage. Around 2014 they moved to Paris, California. Neighbours would say that the children were silent and less spoken to. They appeared to be pale and malnourished. The children didn't spend all of their time in captivity. They went on trips to Disneyland, which I think was a front to show the world that they are a happy family, so we couldn't see what was happening behind the scenes. This sordid lifestyle for the Turpin family continued for years until one winter day in January of 2018, their 17-year-old daughter finally ran. During the time of their arrest, they had been planning to move again to Oklahoma. It was this that had Jordan running to the police. By 2018, the children had been planning to escape their parents for more than 2 years. On January 14th, 2 of the girls left the house through a window. The younger girl was 13 years old and was so scared that she decided to go back. But Jordan, who was 17, had managed to push herself and put quite a distance between the home. She managed to call 911 on a cell phone she had and told the dispatcher that she and her siblings were being abused by their parents and that the smell in the house was so bad sometimes she could barely breathe. As the first officer arrived and spoke to her, she told him that 2 of her sisters and 1 of her brothers were currently chained to their beds. She then showed him photos of the inside of the house.
Okay. I just ran away from home.
Okay.
And I live in a family of 15.
Okay.
My 2 little sisters right now are chained up.
They're chained up?
Yes,
Where are they chained up at?
on their bed. Now, mother didn't chain them up just to be mean. Okay. They're chained up because they stole mother's food.
Uh-huh.
But I'm sorry if I talk too much. Okay. I've never talked to anybody out there, so I've never been alone with a person, so this is very hard for me to talk. Okay.
How do your parents know you left your house?
No, they don't.
Do you take any medication?
What's medication?
Medication?
Yeah, what's medication?
Do you take pills? Do you take pills?
Oh, I
For-
don't think I've ever taken a pill before.
Okay.
Right, I haven't.
The house was raided by deputies from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, saying it was a welfare check. Louise and David would answer the door, and she was confused why they were at the house. But once they got inside, the smell of feces hit them, decaying garbage, dead pets, and mouldy food. Every surface was covered with trash. They found the other 12 children, one who had been chained to the bed for weeks, and 2 others who had just been chained before the officers arrived. The children were covered in bruises, were frail and caked in dirt. They were so malnourished that the deputies thought that they were all under 18, when in fact 7 were over 18. They found journals where the children had written about their lives. For years and years they kept their children imprisoned, beat them and strangled their children, only allowing them to eat once a day and bathe once a year. The older children appeared much younger because of how malnourished they were. 29-year-old Jennifer weighed just 82 pounds. The 12-year-old child had an arm circumference equivalent to a 4-month-old baby. They appeared to lack basic knowledge of the world and had very limited vocabulary. For example, they didn't know what medication was, and in Jordan's world, until she met a police officer, she didn't actually know what they were. David and Louise pleaded guilty to 14 felony charges in order to avoid a trial on February 22, 2019. These included 1 count of torture, 4 counts of false imprisonment, 6 counts of cruelty to an adult dependent, and 3 counts of willful child cruelty. With their sentencing expected on April 25th, they were eager to avoid having their children testify in court. Prosecutors described how thoroughly the children were traumatized and that their cognitive impairment and nerve damage will likely affect them for the rest of their lives. The district attorney, Mike Hestron, said, "This is amongst the worst, most aggravated child abuse cases that I've ever seen or been involved in my career as a prosecutor. Part of what went into the decision making in this agreement and this sentence is that the victims in this case would not ultimately have to testify." While David and Louise are expected to be sentenced to life in prison, and it can't be easy for any of the children to see that, the newly liberated Turpin children seem to be on a promising new path of physical and psychological recovery. Mike Hestron said, "I was very taken by them, their optimism, by their hope for the future. They have a zest for life and huge smiles. I'm optimistic for them, and I think that's how they feel about their future." Jack Osborne, an attorney who represented the kids, said that they're not really looking back now. They're looking forward, working on school, working on their health, and working on learning and doing basic life skills. Tragically, their lives hadn't really gotten any easier. All the children spent 2 months in hospital, after which 6 minors were placed into 2 foster homes. Doctors said that they had various issues, including heart damage due to a lack of nutrients, cognitive impairments, and neuropathy. In October 2019, 5 of the younger children were adopted by an abusive family. Allegations included hitting them in the face with sandals, pulling their hair, hitting them with a belt, and striking their heads. They were forced to eat excessively and then forced to eat their own vomit. The foster father was accused of grabbing and fondling them and kissing them on the mouth. They were arrested and charged with abusing multiple children in their care. At the start of 2020, the DA reported that the children were living independently, working and going to school, and that one of them had graduated from college. A special was televised called Escape from the House of Horrors in November 2021. This reported that some of the children were being neglected by social services in Riverside County. Some were homeless, and they weren't even allowed to use the hundreds of thousands of dollars that was donated to them. The money was placed into a trust controlled by a court-appointed guardian, Vanessa Espinosa. Joshua Turpin said that he wasn't allowed to access the funds and was told he couldn't buy a bike. During an interview, Jordan said that she was released without warning from her foster home, without knowing how to live, what to do about housing, or how to get food and healthcare. This is currently still being investigated, still so many years after their escape. In July 2022, the siblings filed lawsuits against the foster care agency that placed them in a home where they were further abused and neglected. One lawsuit represented 2 older siblings, and another was for the 4 younger siblings. The Sheriff's County Department investigated the foster homes, which included 9 victims. On September 9, 2024, 3 of the foster parents pleaded guilty to the charges of abuse. Marcelino Oguien to 3 counts of lewd and lascivious acts on a child under 14, 1 count of child endangerment and false imprisonment. His wife Rosa and daughter Lenny were charged with child endangerment and false imprisonment. On October 18th, Marcelino was sentenced to 7 years in state prison, and Rose and Lenny were sentenced to 4 years of probation. Jordan and Jennifer have started their lives getting on TikTok and earning money to live and support their siblings.